All right, today I'm joined by Russ Romano. Russ is the founder and co-owner of D1 Mindset Coach, where they help athletes, teams, and organizations elevate their mental game, culture, and leadership. He's a former Division One pitcher at the University of Vermont and a former teammate of renowned mental performance coach Brian Cain. Russ is certified in mental performance mastery, and D1's program is built on 10 pillars of mental peak performance, the same system used by elite athletes and championship programs across the country. Top with all that, he runs a financial planning practice where he helps clients find clarity and close the gap from where they are to where they want to go in the future. He brings a rare blend of high performance athletics, real world leadership, and coach expertise. Russ, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Tony. Appreciate it.
Um, let's talk about those 10 pillars and kind of jump right into it if you don't mind. I went on your website, watched a video, which I'll want to bring up in a second here, but if you don't mind, let's just take maybe 30 seconds, a minute and a half on each one of these pillars, and kind of just talk us through that. So developing an elite mindset. What is that? Like, what does that mean? How do you accomplish that? Obviously, this is different for, you said, athletes, coaches, and organizations. So you might deal with an athletic department and you work with coaches specifically. You might deal with athletes specifically. And then, I went through this. I hired an outside consulting agency when I was senior vice president of sales. So I got coaching myself and asked that my managers that reported to me also got coaching. So it sounds like you might do some of that with your program. Man, a lot of questions, a lot of long-winded there. Tell us about what you do, how you do it, and then kind of get into that first pillar. Sorry,
Yeah,
too
well,
much coffee this morning.
yeah, no worries, Tony. Well, I got started in this because I was, a high performing athlete myself. One of the best high school athletes in the area where I grew up. Went on and was lucky enough to play at the Division One level in college, and I really saw the disconnect between where I was in high school, and now I'm a small fish in a big pond, right, in the big ocean, quite frankly, when you go to the college level. And I think the separation between being a good athlete and a great or an elite athlete is really within the inches in between the ears. And while I was gritty, while I was motivated at times, I didn't have any systematic approach to perform mentally. It was a big culture shock for me when everyone was their best athlete on the high school team, right? So how do you overcome that? And when I reconnected with my former college teammate, Brian Cain, who had been working in the mental performance space for decades, working with some of the most elite athletes in the world, like Bobby Witt Jr. and Corbin Burns, and some elite college programs as well. I learned that these skill sets are skill sets. They're trainable skills. They're not just inherently born within somebody. So having an elite mindset is something that you could develop, right? Waking up each morning and choosing how you want to attack the day. So we're working with athletes, we're working with coaches and teams to to develop these pillars of mental performance in a very systematic approach, as opposed to leaving it to chance, which most athletes and coaches do. They have some really talented athletes, they have some athletes that are struggling in certain areas, and they do the best they can. But when they realize that there's a system out there to help train these skill sets, their eyes pop. They're like, wow, I'm working on the X's and O's here. I'm kind of playing with the card that the hand that I'm dealt. I didn't know I could develop this area of my team and of my athletes. So it's a huge benefit for coaches and teams, and obviously with the individual athletes we work with as well.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump in there. I remember, I think it was on your YouTube short, or maybe it's Instagram, but it was that Novak Djokovic clip where they had said how he was just really good at the mental side of it, almost insinuating that it was natural or born into him, and he was pretty sharp to respond and be like, no, man, like I've trained at this. I trained at this every day, just like I trained my physical side of it. And, and I think he really wanted to get that across of, hey, I have negative thoughts like everyone else, and they pop into my head all the time. The difference between me and maybe someone else, or me like other elite athletes and someone else, is that I can flip the switch pretty quickly. I acknowledge that I have those negative thoughts, but I have training on how to overcome them. That
Yeah.
was I loved it. I'm a big tennis fan and golf fan, because it is so mental.
It,
But yeah,
it,
expand on that.
it's the separator, right? It's not about talent when you get to a certain level. It's about how quickly can you overcome from adversity, and it's not avoiding adversity, as Djokovic had alluded to. It is recognizing when you're having certain feelings, when you're having certain negative self-talk, when adversity hits you in the face. It's recognizing that and then having a process to get you back to the present moment so you can not focus on what happened last play, not have anxiety about what could potentially happen in the next play. Focus on where your feet are right now, on the present moment. And that is a skill set, right? That is something that can be trained. So when we work with athletes, we have something called a 3-step release, where we're training our athletes to develop a systematic process to go through once they recognize they're in this, we call it a red light phase. There's, red light, green light, yellow light. And when the game starts speeding up, when they start to recognize themselves getting anxious, or having negative self-talk, or their body language is sulking and they're not performing in the present moment, they're not at their best, they recognize that, and then they have a process to go through to get themselves back to green light. So it is something that is worked on. It's practiced. I have our athletes practicing we call it the 3-step release, practicing their 3-step release process as a baseball player when they're taking batting practice, when they're hitting off the tee. Maybe every third swing, they're stepping out of the box and they're going through their 3-step release. For a pitcher, they're doing, dry runs on the mound in the bullpen session without a baseball, and they are mentally rehearsing how they're going to respond to adversity and going through their motions, stepping off the mound, going through their 3-step release. So it is something that the elite know about and they practice, and that's something that we're taking to youth athletes and high school athletes and college athletes so they can create separation and improve their game as well.
How is it being received on the youth level and the high school level? I mean, I think people now take this as the norm with elite athletes, that they hire multiple coaches to maximize their peak performance. But for the youth side of things, it's just not, correct me if I'm wrong, it's not really a mainstream thing. I mean, when has a hitting coach and they have a throwing coach and a strength coach and speed and agility, but in that repertoire is not a mental coach. Is that still true? Is it evolving? And how can we make it more mainstream?
It's definitely evolving. And I'll ask you this question. How much of, let's use baseball and stay in that world. How much of baseball is mental? What percentage of baseball is mental, would you say?
Man, I mean, an absolute ton of it. Especially as you advance within your career, the more, I would say, successful you are, the higher level you play, the more it is mental. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, Yogi Berra had that famous phrase, baseball's 90% mental, the other half is physical. Most of the coaches and athletes that I speak to, and parents, they would typically say 70, 80, 90% of the game is mental. And then my next question is, well, what percentage of your time are you spending on developing that part of your game? And the answer is typically nothing, 0%. So if the game is 70,
Yeah.
80,
Yeah.
90% mental, and this could be related to golf or tennis or football, any sport that you're playing as an athlete, if your game has a high percentage of your skill set, you need to have a strong mental game, and you're not working on that part of your game, you're going to be at a disadvantage. So for youth athletes, for youth coaches, whether it's, high school or younger, to not acknowledge and develop some level of this part of your game, I think is doing athletes a real disservice, because at the end of the day, what percentage of these athletes are going to go on and become professionals and earn a living doing this? A very tiny, minuscule piece. So what is sports here for? Why are we doing this? Right? We're doing this to raise really strong and great adults. Right? I didn't become a professional baseball player, right? But what did sport teach me? And the mental side of the game teaches you how to overcome adversity, how to develop habits and routines of excellence so you can consistently get better and develop self-confidence, right? And you need that in any walk of life, not just athletics. So the mental side of the game is huge, not only for athletic development, but for personal development, right? How do you create goals, and how do you stay accountable to those goals, right? So these are all aspects of the mental game that we coach the athletes and the teams that we work with.
Referencing that video in right after the intro, we both kind of share something in common of losing a parent or parents at a younger age. How much, obviously, that impacted you kind of goes without saying, but how did it maybe influence you to getting into this profession?
Yeah.
Is this something that you realized in the moment that you could have used some help, or was it years later where you're like, God, I didn't even realize I was in what I was in until later, and if I had, insert something else might have happened because of it.
In
What
the
was
moment,
your
yeah.
kind of mental journey during that time, especially with sports?
Sports became a roller coaster, right? And it's a roller coaster for somebody who doesn't go through the tragedy of losing somebody like a mom or a dad. But assuming that somebody hasn't have that experience, God forbid, that I did, sports and athletics, there's a lot of pressure involved. You get the pressure from coaches, you get the pressure from parents, you get the pressure from your peers, and just wanting to compare yourself to others. For me, sports really became a struggle, right? I battled through it, but I could have excelled so much more if I had some of these skill sets to help me overcome some of the self doubt, some of the fear of failure. After losing your parents, you don't want to lose anything else, right? You want to have full control. And one of our key concepts in the mental performance coaching we do is learning what you can and can't control. We call it, controlling the controllables, right? So we have to flush the things we can't control. You can't control a coach's decision and where they're batting in the lineup, or if they're, playing this game or not. You can't control the weather. You can't control, what your parents are saying after a game. The only thing you can control is your response, right? And we use an equation, E plus R equals O. And it goes back to the Stoics, right? You can't control the events that happen to you. You can't have full control over the outcome. Event plus R equals O. So E is the event, the R is the response, the O is the outcome. There's only one variable in that equation that you can control, and that's your response. And that's to anything in life. A prospective client says no to you. You can't control that. What you can control is what you do next in your response. So for me, I would say,
Yeah, and that's what
yeah,
it yeah, I was just watching. This is actually Marco Rubio. Sounds crazy, right? But Marco Rubio is talking about the changes at the NCAA level with the potentially the 5 years, and how important he felt it was in sports. And he's like, you gotta remember, like, we're developing. These kids are learning at a great time in their lives. They're learning unity and teammates and how to show up. And when you're an athlete, playing a sport and going to school, you got 6 a.m. workouts, and that it doesn't, maybe doesn't sound like a lot, but being on time and being present and showing up for yourself, let alone your team, an amazing trait to learn
Yeah.
during a crucial point in your life. Um, oh, even at that level, we're starting to get the attention of the importance of sports in people's lives right now.
And from a professional perspective, Tony, I would say, when we're looking for, elite future financial advisors, or when an employer is looking to hire somebody for their company, I want to look to former athletes. I forget what the exact statistic is, but a very high percentage of Fortune 500 CEOs, it could be 90+%, were former athletes. There's a reason for that. Now, what sport teaches you, that's dependent upon the athlete and how they go about recognizing different situations, responding to them accordingly, and training some of the skill sets to overcome adversity. And in today's sports dynamic, where there's a big emphasis on games and tournaments and winning, and I feel not enough emphasis on development. I think we're going in the wrong direction there. And I don't know if one family or one athlete's going to change this big train that's moving in that direction. But as a family, as a team, you could start to do what others aren't doing. And that's what creates separation. I always say, you do what everyone else does, you're going to get what everyone else gets. And really, elite teams and programs and athletes, they're different. So they're doing things differently, right? They're doing mental imagery and visualization, right? They're having conversations about resetting after adversity and having a process for it. They're developing routines for every aspect of their game. What do they do in the morning of a game? What do they do before each pitch? What do they do when they're about to step into the batter's box? Having that systematic approach creates consistency, and it also creates self-belief, because no matter what the situation is, whether it's the bottom of the ninth with 2 outs and runners on, and you're the guy or girl who is about to come to the plate, or if it's a scrimmage at the beginning of the season, no matter what the situation, you're going about your process the same exact way. And that tells the mind, I've been here before, right? It's okay. I've been here before, right? And that all leads to your preparation. And that's a big component of developing that confidence that every athlete is in dire search of, right? If you ask an athlete, like, do you wish you can be confident no matter what? Everyone will raise their hand. Absolutely. And unfortunately, the vast majority of us, we're tying our confidence to outcomes. We're tying our confidence to the part of that equation, right? E plus R equals O, that you cannot control. So you're always going to have varying levels of confidence based on the most recent performance. And that's no way to go about living out life or living out your athletic journey, right? You tie your confidence to your preparation, right? What are the habits and routines that you're doing on a daily and weekly basis to get you as prepared as possible? You're tying your confidence to reflecting on past positive production, right? Imagining, like we call it the highlight reel and the cookie jar. I stole that from David Goggins, the cookie jar. When you're in a situation where you're having self-doubt, you reach into the cookie jar of different moments in your life where you were battling adversity and you overcame, and you reflect on those. So before a big at bat, you're like, oh my God, like this is I struck out last time against this guy or girl. I don't know if I can do this. Reach into that cookie jar and remind yourself, you've been here before, dude, right? Like you can do this. So preparation, past production, and self-talk, right? Like, how are you talking to yourself, right? Be your best friend, be your best coach. Don't rely on, family or coaches to do it. You have to coach yourself as a high performing athlete. And if you find yourself having negative self-talk, you
You
have to
have
you have to catch that.
you have a couple other really cool analogies. If you don't mind, I want to go through the three of them at least that I caught on. I'm sure you have more. One was praise the process, not the outcome. What do you coach on that? Praise the process, not the outcome.
What we have to teach our athletes to become amazing adults and professionals and continue their athletic journey is to not tie their self-worth, to not tie praise strictly to outcomes. You have to praise the process. And what the process is what are you doing every single day to be the best version of yourself? Right? So, one of the things we have our athletes do is make their bed every morning, right? What's one thing you can do that doesn't cost a cent, takes, 2 minutes to do, and you can say to yourself, hey, you know what? I got my first win of the morning. I made my bed, right? So the process is everything that you do to prepare to be the best version of yourself. And that's the process, right? Your routines, your habits, develop that daily discipline. And that's the process. And that's what we need to focus on as parents. We need to focus on that as coaches because the outcomes will eventually take care of themselves. If you focus on the process, and Nick Saban is a master at this, right? He took Alabama to the most elite level of college football, and he literally, coins his coaching style, the process, right? Because it's all about focusing on the controllables. And you can control the process. You can control what you do every day, how you think, how you talk to yourself. You can control your body language. You can control your preparation. You can't control outcomes, right? But outcomes, are a lagging indicator. The process is a leading indicator, right? So if you're not getting the outcomes you want over a long period of time, you have to do something about your process, right? It's not that you're a bad athlete or you're a bad team. It's, well, what is our process? Are we, organized? Are we preparing? Are we disciplined, right? Like always focus on the process. And especially as a parent, I have to catch myself, to, say negative things about outcomes or even in praise, right? Like focusing on just praising for outcome based experiences, right? If my son, hits a home run or makes a great play, like of course we want to acknowledge that and praise that, but I want to emphasize the process, like what he did throughout the week to get that result, right? How he treated his teammates, the hustle that I saw him show on the field. That's what we need to focus on because the outcomes are going to come and go. Sometimes he's going to be 4 for 4. Sometimes he's going to be 0 for 4. And if we only praise the outcomes, that is basically wiring them to, focus on their outcomes, and their self-worth is based on their outcomes. And I know I'm getting deep here, but that's how the mind works, right? And that's what we're unintentionally training our kids and our athletes to think like when we only focus on positive or negative outcomes.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's to me, it's not deep at all. That's great. I love it. Let's take a quick break, but I want to come back to those couple other analogies that I talked about. Be the coffee bean was one of them, and feed the right wolf was the other. So take a quick break. We'll be right back, and let's get into those two topics.
Awesome. Thanks, Tony.
All right, appreciate that word from our sponsor. Before we left off, we were talking about a couple other great analogies. Be the coffee bean and feed the right wolf. Let's start with be the coffee bean. What do you mean by that? What's your story there?
Well, I didn't make up this analogy. It didn't come from me, but I just love the analogy because, you know, we could either we can either be the coffee bean. We can be, if when the pressure is on and everything around us is boiling, right? How do we respond? Right? Do we react like everyone else is reacting in pressure moments, right? They're nervous or they're angry because the umpire made a bad call or the official made a bad call, or are we going to respond differently to pressure moments? So, there's an analogy. You have a carrot, you have an egg, and you have a coffee bean. And when the carrot is put in hot water and when the egg is put in hot water, well, the carrot becomes soft. The carrot changes its biology, right? The pressure and the hot water around it change the carrot, right? Same thing with the egg. When the egg is boiled, it becomes hard. It changes its structure because of the pressure and the water around it. But the coffee bean is different. The coffee bean doesn't change its structure. The coffee bean actually changes the environment around it, right? It changes the hot water, right? And it turns it into this wonderful drink that I love every morning, a beautiful, nice, warm cup of coffee. And it makes it something pleasant. So when I say, a phrase like be the bean, right? Be the coffee bean, it means respond to situations and lift people up. Change your environment. Don't let your environment change you, right? Regardless of what's happening around you, whether it's a negative play, whether it's a toxic situation in the clubhouse, on a team, whatever it is, be the bean, right? And that's what we mean by that.
Excellent. I love it. Love it. What's feed the right wolf? What's that all about?
Uh, uh, I just spoke at a leadership summit for a high school, and that's one of the concepts we were talking about, and I believe it's a Cherokee parable about the fact that we all live with two wolves, and these two wolves are constantly fighting one another. Right? There's a positive wolf, and there's a negative wolf, right? And they are always at battle. And, if you ask me the question, well, which wolf wins at the end of the day, it's the one you feed most. It's the one you feed. So we have a choice as people, as athletes. Are we going to constantly listen to that negative wolf saying, you can't do this? I hope I don't get out. Oh man, I just made an error. I hope I don't make another one. I'm no good. Are we going to constantly listen to that internal voice of the negative wolf? Or are we going to choose to feed our positive wolf? And that internal self-talk is so important. Mookie Betts, one of the best ball players in baseball, had a great interview after the World Series. He made that final double play out to win the World Series. And he was talking about how he was talking to himself on shortstop. He was saying, come on, Mook, you got this. Let's go. You're the man. He was constantly talking to himself and feeding that positive wolf as opposed to listening to the negative wolf, which may say, oh man, I hope the ball's not hit to me. Right? And we all go through this as athletes, whether it's you're playing basketball, like, oh, don't pass me the ball for the final shot. No, it's when you get that final shot, you're going to drain it. Right? And even if you don't feel like it, you have to act as if. Right? And that's not fake it till you make it. It's acting as if you're confident. Right? Act as if is a wonderful philosophy that I learned from a great sports psychologist professor at Montclair State University, Dr. Rob Gilbert. And he talks about acting as if, right? If you want to be more confident, if you want to be more disciplined, if you want to be a better hitter, Well, act as if. Do what really great hitters do. Do what really confident people do, right? So it's acting as if. It's not having bad habits and then pretending, but act as if. And when you're in a pressure moment, you have to constantly feed that positive wolf. You have to stand like you're 10 feet tall and bulletproof with your body language. And if you do those things internally, your mindset will start to shift a little bit. And you're going to give yourself the best probability of success to walk into that batter's box or take that final shot in a confident way.
Yeah, referencing back, you had made a comment earlier about Fortune 500 or just high level employees, employers, entrepreneurs. They all, not all of them, but there's a large proportion of them, especially in women at the female level. It's even higher. But in looking at your pillars and kind of connecting the dots there, I mean, some of the things that you're coaching in the mental pillars are time management, organization. Obviously, you have to be really good at that if you're, sort of a C-suite employee or an entrepreneur. You have to learn to develop culture within that business. Leadership is something that you're learning at the athlete level and that you're coaching as part of your pillars, and then routines and habits of excellence. So, there's 10 of your pillars. I want to get into those, but those four to me is like, if you do all of those things, your chance of success in life are unbelievable, regardless of whatever it is that you do. Is that right? Yeah.
The skill sets that we train are transferable. And one of my favorite coaching moments with mental performance is when my daughter was in class with one of our athletes that we were working with, and before a big exam, she told me that he had his eyes closed, he took a deep 6-8 breath, and he repeated to himself, "You got this. Let's get after it." And she like looked at him and she said, "Did you learn that from my dad?" And he said, "Yeah." So I loved that story because it said to me that, these athletes are taking these skill sets that we're teaching them and we're having them practice and develop. They're taking them into the classroom and they're taking them to off the field activities as well to develop them as a person as well as an athlete. So, you need these skills and time management. I think at some point everyone fell into this trap of thinking multitasking is an effective skill set, and multitasking is the enemy of being in the present moment. I think studies show that it takes the mind something like 10 or 15 minutes to reorient itself to get back to full focus on what you're working on. So if you're constantly juggling things and going, and we all fall into this trap of checking our emails, right? Or checking our text messages when we're in the middle of a task, right? Like as adults, we do this. So, when we're doing this, it really does take the mind minutes and minutes and minutes to get yourself back to full present moment focus on what you're trying to accomplish. So think about how many times over the course of a day we do this. And our athletes growing up in this environment of social media and like just constant bings and notifications. I took my daughter's phone away the other day, and it was on my desk, and the amount of dings and notifications she got in the span of 10 minutes, I had to move the phone out of the room because I couldn't figure out how to shut off the notifications. But it actually created anxiety for me, and it wasn't even my phone. So time management and organization, it creates freedom. It creates focus. So, we go through our calendars where our athletes, and most of our athletes are still in school. So a big chunk of their day is occupied by school. So 7:30 to 3 o'clock, their time block is chunked out for school. So what are you doing from the time you wake up to the time you go to school? to make that time as efficient and effective as possible to make sure you win the morning, right? And as adults and kids, like win the morning because that sets up your day. So we have a morning routine, right? Where my son doesn't do it every day. He's not a robot. He's not perfect, but my kids, they're making their bed. Hopefully, they're eating a decent breakfast. They're doing some type of workout, push-ups, sit-ups, squats, right? They're moving the body a little bit. They're setting up their day to dominate, right? So it's time blocking your day. And we use a strategy also called, MITs. What are your most important tasks? And we do this with professional development. Define your MITs today for tomorrow, right? Before you wake up in the morning, so before you shut down your computer at night, what are your MITs for tomorrow? I think Brian Tracy coined the phrase "eat the frog," right? That is like your number one task that you want to make sure that you tackle first. You want to eat the frog first. So you want to eat that frog, and that's the first thing you want to tackle in the morning. And you have your most important tasks. And even if you don't get to everything in your day, if you can knock out your MITs, you feel like you had a productive day. So for an athlete, what are your MITs for the day? For a professional, what are your MITs? And define those. We say plan for tomorrow tonight, right? Don't wake up in the morning and let the day pull you in all the directions the day tends to pull people, right? Intentionally design your day. And you do that by managing your calendar intentionally.
Obviously, you're doing this for athletes and you're doing this for coaches and organizational levels at high levels. But do you ever, I know I think this way, so do you ever just think that we're still missing the boat considerably of like education is trying to find its foothold as to, what's important nowadays versus what was important maybe 40, 50, 100 years ago? Don't you feel like this should just be part of the curriculum of every single educational institution at the elementary level, repeated almost every single year in middle school and high school? Like it's just so important to learn these skills that
Yeah.
don't you think it just should be for everyone, not just for athletes and coaches?
Yeah. Yeah. Short answer, absolutely. Do I want my kid learning these skill sets in school? You're darn right I do. But that's what opens up opportunities for us, and we're actually speaking to a private high school currently, who wants to roll out a leadership and leadership development course in their high school, right? So absolutely, it should be part of what we're teaching our kids, not just athletes, everyone. Some universities have leadership courses, right? Obviously, Montclair State has a mental performance, sports psychology course, and that's popular. But that's at the collegiate level. I think our kids should be learning the vast majority of these skill sets, right? Leadership, time management, organization, right? How do you handle adversity? How do you create good habits and goals? Those things are skill sets and they can be taught. So they should be developed, not just left to chance.
Yeah. So if you can walk us through, let's just say you get this school, private institution, or maybe it's an athletic department in a tell us about how you roll this out to a staff or to a school or to the athletes. What's the sort of the X's and O's of that? Is it,
Yeah.
I'm sure it varies, but what's the gist of it?
Yeah. I'll be honest with you. As a school curriculum, I have no idea. That is not what we do. We're in conversations. We are not school administrators. We don't design curriculum for schools per se. but we're in the beginning talks because they see the need for this, and mental performance as well. They see the need for this, and they want to get ideas. So we're in that idea phase of conversation. But when we work with athletic departments, that's where we'll go in and we'll do full day or half day workshops with the coaches of a whole athletic department. So every single sport will typically focus on the athletic directors typically want us to focus on culture development and leadership because what we see, and it was the case when I went to high school as well, it's still the case for most high schools, is every athletic team is kind of operating in its own silo when it comes to leadership and culture, right? And there's no cohesiveness between an athletic department's desired culture and a team's culture. So athletic directors, they want to develop a strong championship culture throughout all the programs. They're just pulled in 10,000 different directions. Athletic directors are putting out fires left and right. They're scheduling. They're making sure, fields and facilities are available. If officials are available. They're dealing with parent complaints, right? They are playing proverbial whack-a-mole when it comes to the day-to-day life of an athletic director. So they're speaking to, companies like ours and saying, yes, like we want this. This was my intention to develop culture and to develop consistent leadership with all our coaches. And then from there, those concepts trickle down to their teams. So we'll do half day and full day workshops with the whole department, going through typically culture development and leadership skill training. And then we typically differentiate ourselves because there are other companies who do something similar to that, where I feel like the differentiator for us is, we know learning comes by spaced repetition. So we'll typically design a program where we're doing virtual Zoom calls with all the coaches throughout the year. And then we'll do deeper dives into how do they implement certain culture activities within their team, within their program. How do they, integrate certain mental performance skill sets with their teams as well. And I think that's a big difference maker, when speaking to coaches and athletic directors, because, the half day and the full day workshops are great, but, we've probably been to conferences and, motivational talks and all this stuff. And it's good. It's great to have, but, you typically a few weeks pass and you kind of fall back into your old ways and you get busy. So the spaced repetition virtual trainings tend to be really effective for the athletic departments. And then many of the coaches that we end up working with through that culture development want us to come and work specifically with their team in conjunction with them.
That's great. I think we've probably touched on without like going. My original intent in this was like, hey, let's go like kind of one by one. But I feel like we've covered throughout this conversation the different the different 10 pillars. Right? Is there anything that we might have sort of sidestepped or overlooked that you want to specifically point out of the 10 pillars that we haven't talked about yet?
I would say focusing on the process. It depends what perspective we're coming from, but whether you're coming from the perspective of being a parent of an athlete or the coach of an athlete, I think focusing on the process is huge in an athlete's development. One kind of myth I think that's out there is thinking that the best athlete at the age of 11 or 10 is going to be the best athlete when they're 17 and 18. And that's not the case. I truly believe that if you coach and help your athletes develop the things that they control, their habits, their routines, their attitude, their effort, their work ethic, right? those kids who were just middle of the road when they were 10 or 11, right? If they're coachable, if they develop a good work ethic, and very often they are late bloomers, right? They'll develop a little later on physically. That reshuffles the deck, right? And very often the average athlete when they're 10 or 11 becomes the best athlete, maybe going on to playing college ball at the next level. And some of those early bloomers who were dominating their sport when they were 10 and 11, if they didn't develop the skill sets that we're talking about, they fall back. They fall back. So, speaking personally, like, for my son, he's a baseball player, he's a football player. Now with baseball, not for football, he's playing up. He's playing on a team that's 1 year older than he is. I did that for a number of reasons, but one of the big concepts that's relevant to what we're talking about is I don't need my 11-year-old to be the best 11-year-old on the team. I don't need that. I want him to be surrounded by really good athletes, really good people, and get really good coaching, knowing that athletically right now, because he's playing at an older level, he's probably going to be middle of the pack to lower the pack, right? Physically, right? And production wise, right? But I want to just continue to focus on developing the habits and focusing on the process and focusing on the things he can control. So he doesn't tie his self-worth to outcomes and performance, because I see these kids getting burnt out, right? Where, they're playing, 80, 90 games in a baseball or softball season. And you do that from the age of 9. By the time you're 13, um, you're seeing a lot of these kids say, you know what, let me try lacrosse, or let me try a different sport. And they fall out of love with it because they're getting burnt out and they feel the pressure at such a young age. And there's pressure that's good, but it's got to be done the right way, right? If you're focused solely on production, if you're focused solely on the wins and the trophies, those things are out of your control, and that's going to burn kids out. So I think we need to focus on development and kind of have a little bit of a shift in our mindset. And that's not always easy to do. Like, I'm a competitive person. Like, I don't want to see my kid go 0 for 4, right? I don't want to see the teams that he plays for lose. But what are we learning, right? Kobe Bryant always says, like I don't losing, winning, like whatever, if I'm losing, that gives me feedback. Failure is feedback, right? And that's the mindset you have to have. The only difference is if you don't change, right? If you keep doing the same thing and you keep getting the same outcomes, that's not what you want. You want to reflect, figure out, okay, well, what could I do differently, right? And then work on those skill sets to improve the next time. So the most elite athletes are taking failure as feedback, and they're not kicking themselves and knocking themselves down because they lost a game or they struck out in a big spot. They're saying, what could I do differently? And we have a process called well, better, how. And, we do this with our teams, and we do this with ourselves to reflect. Hey, what do we do? What do we do really well? Let's reflect on that and highlight that. What could we have done better, and how can we do it better for the next time? And it's a very simple exercise that creates self-awareness, and then it also allows us to focus on the things we can improve upon. I don't know if that answered the question, but I
Yeah,
would.
I always say it does. It does. I always say late is great. Talking about those late bloomers, late is great. I mean, and when they're undersized, like literally, like this probably is the great finale to this conversation is when you're undersized and you're not as good as everyone else, you have to work harder. You have to, organize your time because you're putting more time into your craft. You have to, develop better routines. You have to develop better habits. You have to, visualize of who you're going to become, because who you are today isn't really
Yeah.
that good. I mean, literally everything that we talked about is like the reason why those late bloomers end up being so good, and why the kid that's 6'2" and 200 pounds at 11 years old is like, why do I need to listen to anyone, man? I'm hitting home runs, or I'm doing this in football or basketball. Like, they never learn those things because they don't have to. They're just good because they're big, not because they're actually good. And we
Yeah.
talk about this kind of cross where the late bloomer goes like this, and not that the early developer is gets worse. He just doesn't get better. He just kind of stays the same, where the late bloomer goes like this. So kind of a perfect bookend to this conversation of there's a reason why late bloomers have more success, and it's literally everything that you are teaching and coaching your athletes, and hopefully the parents as well as the
Yeah.
coaches.
And Tony, imagine you're not a late bloomer and you learn and develop the skill sets that we coach and teach. Now you're just going to be on another level. So I tell the
Yeah,
12-year-old
yeah,
team that I coach, that my son is on, I said, guys, we're doing things that others your age aren't doing, and we're going to be special because of it. So let's lean into it, right? Focusing on the
yes,
process, right?
yes,
So that's key.
yes, yes, absolutely. Well, tell everyone how to whether you're an athletic director, a coach, a parent. Which again, I can't probably emphasize that enough. Of like, parents need this training as more than anyone. If you're an athlete, a parent, a coach, an athletic director, a large organization, how do they get a hold of you? And what's the best way to connect to sign up for your program?
Yeah, no, thank you, Tony. It was awesome, speaking with you today. We love working with individual athletes, teams, athletic programs, whether they're high school or organizations in youth sports. They can visit our website at d1mindsetcoach.com. They can connect with us on Instagram or Facebook, social platforms. D1 Mindset Coach on some of those social platforms. We love to hear from anyone who's interested in learning more about developing a part of the game that is underdeveloped in everyone, right? So, it was a real pleasure speaking to you today.
Thank
Hey,
you, and
hey,
do at a minimum follow on the social platforms. I have. Go ahead.
yeah, no, I would say one of the things that we're really excited about is we're going to be rolling out an interactive app that anyone can use on a free basis. There's also upgrades involved, but we're going to be using this as a really strategic tool in our live coaching. And it's for parents, it's for athletes, it's for coaches. So we're super pumped about it, and it's in the works. So, keep your eyes and ears open for it. So we're excited about it.
Looks that's exciting. Appreciate you sharing that. Again, do give them a follow at a minimum on social, because there's some unbelievable tidbits of information that he releases all the time. Partner up with them, and Russ, I appreciate all your time and efforts here in this craft, but also here on this show. Appreciate everything, and looking forward to continuing to follow along on your guys' journey.
Thanks, Tony. I appreciate you.
All right, we'll take care.
You can dance, but you gotta keep it up a little something like this, like this, like this, like this, like this, like this, like this.